Omar Khalid pressed the muzzle of his rifle against the wounded soldier's forehead and smiled because he wanted the others to watch. He wanted them to hear the boy beg. "Your radios are dead," he said in clean, unhurried English. "No planes are coming, no helicopters, no God is listening tonight." He had counted their bullets. He had counted their breaths. 4 American SEALs trapped in a valley he believed he owned, and he intended to take his time with every one of them. Before we go on, do me one small favor. Subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because this story earns every second. And in the comments, tell me the name of the city you're watching from right now, so I can see just how far this story travels tonight. The valley had a name once, but nobody who mattered remembered it anymore. To the men of SEAL Team Alpha, it had only one meaning now. It was the place they were going to die. Chief Michael Hayes lay against a shelf of cold stone with his rifle across his knees and 11 rounds left in the whole world. And he did the math again because a part of him refused to believe it the first time. 11 rounds, 4 men, one of them dying. He counted it a third time and the number did not change, and he understood that arithmetic had become the only honest thing left in that valley. "Chief," Jake Reynolds whispered from 6 feet away, hunched over the ruined radio like a man trying to bring a dead child back to life. "I've got nothing. No carrier, no signal. The main board's gone, the backup's gone. I can't raise anybody." "Keep trying," Hayes said. "I've been trying for 70 hours. Then try for 71. Jake didn't argue. He was 28 years old and he had the best hands in the unit, hands that could splice a wire in the dark under fire. And for 3 days, those hands had been useless. And Hayes could see what that was doing to him. A man can carry almost anything except the feeling that his one job is the one thing he can't do. Behind them, in the deepest fold of the rocks, where the light didn't reach, Marcus Bennett was keeping Daniel Walker alive with nothing but his fingers and his will. Bennett was the corpsman, the closest thing to a doctor any of them would see, and Walker was the youngest, 24, and there was a hole in the boy's side that should have killed him 2 days ago, and hadn't only because Bennett wouldn't let it. "Talk to me, Marcus," Hayes said without turning. "He's holding," Bennett answered, and the flatness in his voice told Hayes everything the words tried to hide. "Pulse is thready, he's cold, I'm out of the good stuff. I've got pressure, and I've got prayer, and that's the whole pharmacy." "Daniel," Hayes said. "You hear me, kid?" A long silence, then a voice small and dry. "I hear you, Chief. You stay awake. That's an order." "Copy that." A pause. "It's a stupid order." Bennett almost laughed and the sound came out broken. "He still got his mouth. That's a good sign. When Walker stops complaining, that's when I start worrying." Hayes let himself close his eyes for exactly 1 second. 1 second was all he allowed. Then he opened them and went back to being the man these 3 needed him to be, which was the man who still believed there was a way out, even though he didn't. They had come into this valley whole, 8 men, one of the tightest teams in naval special warfare, sent to help take down a name that had been living at the top of a target list for 2 years. Omar Khalid, a man who moved money and weapons, and worse, across 3 borders, who had turned a network of frightened villages into a private army, who had killed Americans before, and bragged about it on channels the analysts back home monitored with clenched jaws. The plan had been clean. It always was on paper. Insert at night, move to the high ground, wait for the signal, and take him. And they had one more piece, the piece that was supposed to make it impossible for anything to go wrong. Her. "Chief," Jake's voice again, "can I say something and you don't chew my head off?" "Say it." "If she were up there, if Carter were still on that ridge, we wouldn't be pinned like this. She'd have eyes on the whole valley. She'd have called every shooter Khalid put on those slopes before they got within 400 meters. "I know what she'd do," Hayes said quietly. "So where is she?" And there it was. The question none of them had said out loud in 3 days, sitting in the middle of them like a body they'd been stepping around. Hayes didn't answer because the answer was the thing he carried heavier than the 11 rounds and the dying kid and all of it put together. The answer was that he had made a call 72 hours ago when the mountain came down. It happened in the first 10 minutes. That was the cruelty of it. The whole operation, weeks of planning, and it broke apart in the first 10 minutes when the ridge road blew. He would never know if it was a planted charge or a preset trap or just Khalid's men rolling something heavy down onto them. But the north slope came apart in a wall of rock and dust, and Carter had been up there alone, on the high ground she'd insisted on taking because she was the only one who could hold it. Ghost 1 report, he had said into the radio, calm because you stay calm. Ghost 1 report your status. Static. Emily, talk to me. Static. He had called her name 11 times. He remembered the number because he'd counted that too later in the dark, the way you count things you can't change. 11 times, and after the last one, with the enemy already moving and his team already exposed and a decision that had to be made in seconds, he had made it. He had said the words that a leader says when there's no time to be a human being. He had said, Ghost 1 is down. Alpha, we move now. He had written her off. He had stood over the memory of a living woman and closed the book on her so his other 7 men might live, and then he'd lost half of them anyway. And now here they were 3 days later, 4 instead of 8. And the woman he'd buried in his own mind might have been buried, in fact, under 100 tons of Afghan rock. I made a call, Hayes said finally, and his voice was steady only because he made it steady. I couldn't reach her. The slope came down on top of her position. There was no time. I called it and we moved. Jake was quiet for a moment. You think she's gone? I think, Hayes said and stopped. He started again. I think if she were alive, we'd have heard from her by now. That's what I think. Carter would find a way to reach us. Maybe there's no way to reach us. Look at your radio. Jake looked down at the dead machine in his lap and had no answer for that. Out beyond the rocks, in the failing light, the enemy was moving again. Hayes heard it before he saw it, the small shifting sounds of men who no longer had to be careful. That was the worst part. In the first day, they had been cautious, probing, unsure of how many Americans were left and how much fight they had. By the second day, they'd grown bolder. Now on the third, they moved openly upright, walking the high ground like landlords because they had done the same math Hayes had done, and they liked their number better than his. They're setting something up, Bennett said from the shadows. He'd left Walker for 10 seconds to crawl up beside Hayes and look. Top of the far slope, you see it. Hayes saw it, his stomach turned over slow and cold. It was a heavy machine gun, a big belt-fed weapon, and 4 men were muscling it up the last of the incline to a lip of rock that looked straight down into the pocket where Alpha was pinned. If they get that gun up and level, Bennett said and didn't finish because he didn't have to. I know. There's no cover from that angle. It'll rake the whole position. Walker can't move. I can't move him fast enough. I know, Marcus. So what do we do? And this was the thing about command that nobody told you when you signed up for it. There would come a moment when the man everyone looked to would have no answer and would still be required to have one. Hayes looked at that gun and he looked at his 11 rounds and he understood with a clarity that was almost peaceful that they were out of moves. He could send 2 men to try to flank the emplacement and they'd be dead before they crossed 20 meters. He could try to move Walker and the boy would bleed out in the dragging. He could wait and let the gun open up and it would be over in less time than it took to describe. We make them pay for it, Hayes said. That's what we do. We make it cost them. Bennett nodded slowly. It was not an answer that saved anyone, but it was an answer a man could stand on, and sometimes that was all a chief had left to give. Chief, Walker's voice from the dark thinner now. Is it bad? It's fine, kid. Rest. You're a terrible liar, Chief. Everybody says so. Hayes almost smiled. Who says so? Everybody. Reynolds, Bennett. Carter used to say it. She said you had a face like a bad poker player. She said that's why they never let you handle the cover stories. The name landed in the middle of them again, and this time nobody stepped around it. She said that, Hayes said. Yeah. Walker coughed and Bennett was back at his side in an instant, hands moving. She said a lot of things. She said if we ever got in real trouble, the kind you don't plan for, she'd be the one to get us out. She promised me that. First week I was on the team. I was scared out of my mind, and she sat down next to me and she said, kid, whatever happens out there, I'll get you home. She promised. Nobody spoke. She didn't get me home, Walker said, and there was no bitterness in it, only a boy's simple sorrow. I don't blame her. I really believed her is all. Hayes had to look away from the shape of the young man in the dark because he could feel something building behind his own eyes that a chief could not afford to feel. Not now, not with the gun going up on the far slope. He made himself remember instead. It was easier to remember than to sit in the present, and the memory came whether he wanted it or not. 6 months earlier, Virginia. The team room at the base, cold coffee and bad fluorescent light. and a new name on the roster that had half the unit talking before she ever walked through the door. Lieutenant Emily Carter, a reconnaissance sniper with a record that read like fiction, transferred in to fill a hole in the team's overwatch capability, and she was the only woman in the room, and Hayes had watched the way some of the men looked at her when she came in, and he had not liked what he saw on a few of those faces. It wasn't her skill anybody doubted. Her file settled that argument before it started. It was something older and dumber than doubt, the simple discomfort of men who had built their whole identity around a certain kind of brotherhood and weren't sure where a woman fit inside it. Hayes had seen it before with other new pieces, and he'd learned that the fastest way to end it was to let the work speak. She'd let the work speak. He remembered the qualification range that first week. He remembered a shot at 1,100 meters in a crosswind that a couple of the loudest skeptics said couldn't be made, not clean, not first try. She'd made it first try. She hadn't gloated. She'd just chambered the next round and made that one too. And then she'd stood up and looked at the men who doubted her and said, "Anybody else want to see it again? Or are we good?" They were good. But the thing Hayes remembered most wasn't the shooting. It was a conversation late, just the two of them after a training exercise that had gone sideways in the way training sometimes does. He'd been testing her honestly the way he tested everyone he was going to trust with his men's lives, and he'd asked her the question he asked all of them. "Let me paint you a picture, Lieutenant," he'd said. "It all falls apart. Comms are down, no air support, no exfil. You're separated from the team, and you're out of ammo. What do you do?" Some men gave him tactics. Some gave him doctrine. One kid had once given him a whole speech about withdrawal protocols. Emily Carter had just looked at him calm, steady, like the question was almost too easy to bother with, and she'd said, "I find a way to get everybody home." "That's not a plan," he'd said. "That's a bumper sticker. You didn't ask me for a plan. You asked me what I'd do. That's what I'd do. I'd get them home. I'd figure out the plan on the way." He'd wanted to push back on it, and he hadn't, because there had been something in the way she said it that he believed. Not confidence exactly. Confidence he saw all day long in operators, and half of it was noise. This was quieter than confidence. It was a decision she'd already made a long time ago about the kind of person she was going to be when everything went wrong, so that she'd never have to make it in the moment when there was no time. He'd known men like that. There weren't many. They were the ones you wanted on your left and your right when the world ended. Now the world had ended in this valley, and the woman who'd said she would get them home was under a mountain, and Hayes was down to 11 rounds and a promise a dead woman had made to a dying kid. "Chief," Jake's voice urgent now low, "they've got the gun up. It's up, Chief. They're feeding the belt." Hayes came back to the present hard. On the far slope, 40 meters up and 200 out, the machine gun was in position, its barrel dropping, hunting for the angle down into the pocket. 4 men crouched around it. Behind them, Hayes could see more shapes moving into position along the ridgeline, more than a dozen rifles glinting in the last of the light. Khalid had brought everyone. He wasn't going to risk another night of the Americans slipping loose. He was going to end it here tonight, and he'd brought a crowd to watch him do it. "Everybody down," Hayes said. "Behind the deep rocks. Marcus, get Walker as flat as you can. When that gun opens up, we don't try to fight it. We survive the first burst, and we look for the bomb, and if there's no gap, we make one, and if we can't make one." He didn't finish. "You know the rest." "Chief," Bennett said, "I want to say something to you men, in case." "Say it after," Hayes said. "Say it to me tomorrow. There might not be a—" "Say it tomorrow, Marcus. That's an order. I don't take last words from my men. We're not there yet." But they were there. Hayes knew they were there, and he knew Bennett knew it, and the only mercy left was that they didn't say it out loud. On the far slope, one of the men around the machine gun raised a hand. A signal. Down in the command position, half hidden behind the rocks, 100 meters up the opposite slope, another figure raised a hand in answer, and even at that distance, even in that light, Hayes knew who it was. Omar Khalid, standing where he could see it all. Standing in the open because he'd earned the right to stand in the open because he'd won. Khalid brought his hand down. The gunner leaned into the weapon. And that was the moment Hayes felt it stretch out the way the worst moments always do, the way a heartbeat can hold a whole lifetime inside it. He looked at his 3 men, Jake with his ruined radio, Bennett with his hands full of Walker's blood. Walker himself, 24 years old, eyes half open, still fighting. And Hayes thought with a strange and terrible calm that he had failed them. That command was a promise, the same promise Carter had made, the "Kid, I will get you home," and he had not kept it, and now there was nothing left but to die well beside them. The gunner's finger tightened on the trigger, and a shot cracked across the valley. It did not come from the machine gun, it came from somewhere high and far, and to the north, a single flat report that rolled across the rocks, precise, cold, almost gentle, in how exact it was, and on the far slope, the gunner's head snapped sideways, and the man simply folded over his own weapon and did not move again. For one full second, nobody understood. Hayes stared at the machine gun with its dead crew leader draped over the barrel, and his mind refused to process it. The men around the gun had frozen. Up and down the ridgeline, the enemy had gone still, heads turning weapons, swinging, hunting for a threat that wasn't supposed to exist. "What?" Jake breathed. "What was that?" "Chief, what was that?" "Down," Hayes said. "Stay down." The second shot came. It found a man near the machine gun who had half risen, and it took him cleanly, and he dropped, and now the confusion on the far slope turned into something else, something Hayes hadn't seen on those faces in 3 days. Fear. The enemy had spent 3 days as the hunters. In the space of 2 shots, somebody had turned them into prey, and they didn't know who, and they didn't know where, and there is nothing in the world that unravels a confident man faster than a threat he cannot see. "That's a rifle," Bennett said, and his voice had climbed with something that was almost hope and afraid to be. "Chief, that's a bolt gun. That's a sniper. Somebody's up on the North Ridge." "There's nobody on the North Ridge," Hayes said. "The North Ridge came down. Nobody could be." The third shot answered him. It reached all the way across the valley, past the machine gun crew, up the opposite slope, into the huddle of the command position, and one of the figures standing near Omar Khalid crumpled, and Hayes watched the great warlord who had owned this valley for 3 days flinch backward and grab at his own men and drag them into cover. And the sight of it, Khalid ducking, Khalid running for the rocks, hit Hayes in the chest like a live thing. "Somebody's shooting from the high ground," Jake said, half laughing, half terrified. "Somebody's picking them off. Chief, who is that who?" And then the radio in Jake's lap, the dead radio, the radio he had bled over for 70 hours, crackled. It was faint. It was buried under static, a signal fighting its way through 100 kinds of interference, thin as a thread. But it was there, and every man in that pocket heard it, and every one of them went absolutely still. A voice came through. Alpha team, this is Ghost 1. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Jake stared down at the radio in his lap as if it had spoken in a dead man's voice, which as far as any of them had believed for 3 days it had. Hayes's hand found the radio. His fingers weren't steady. He keyed it. When he spoke, his voice came out cracked and low, and it did not sound like the voice of a chief. It sounded like the voice of a man who had buried someone and was watching the grave come open. "Ghost 1, he said. Say again your call sign." The static swelled, and through it that voice, tired beyond describing, rough with pain, but unmistakably, impossibly hers. "You heard me the first time, Chief. Ghost 1. I'm still on station." "Emily," Hayes said, and the name came out of him before rank or protocol or anything else could stop it. "Emily, we thought 3 days. We thought you were, I know what you thought." A short breath, and Hayes could hear how much even talking was costing her. "I lost comms. I lost my primary, my backup, and about 40 feet of the ridge I was standing on. But I never left the mission, Michael. I have never once left the mission." Bennett had crawled to the radio. Jake was gripping his own knee so hard his knuckles had gone white. And in the dark, Daniel Walker was trying to lift his head. "Is that," Walker whispered, "is that her, Chief? Is that Carter?" "It's her kid," Hayes said, and his voice broke on it. "It's her." Walker made a sound that was half sob and half laugh, and Bennett had to hold him down. "She came back," Walker said. "She said she'd get me home, and she came back. Chief, she came back." On the far slope, the enemy had begun to shout to one another, sharp, panicked voices calling across the rocks, and Hayes heard a note in them he had learned to recognize over a long career. It was the sound of an army that had just realized the situation was no longer what they thought it was, and that Hayes knew was the most dangerous moment in any fight, and also the most fragile, because an enemy that had been certain of victory and suddenly wasn't, could break, and if you knew how to push it in exactly the right instant, the whole thing could come apart. Ghost 1. Hayes said all business, now command flooding back into him and bringing him alive. What's your status? Give me a picture. My status is I'm still breathing, and I still have rounds, and that's more than they know, Carter said. Listen to me. I've been watching this valley for 2 days. I couldn't reach you, and I couldn't come down without giving away that I was alive, so I did the only thing I could do. I sat still, and I learned them. I know where their fallback positions are. I know where they've cached ammunition. I know the 3 routes they'd use to pull back, and I know where their leadership stands when they think they've won, because he stood in the same spot every single night, the arrogant. A pause. Michael, I have had Omar Khalid in my glass 6 times in 2 days. 6 times. And I did not take the shot because the moment I did, they'd have swarmed you before you could move. I needed him to bring everyone out into the open first. I needed the whole snake in one place. Hayes closed his eyes. 2 days. She had lain up on a broken ridge, wounded alone with the man they'd crossed the world to kill in her sights 6 times, and she had held her fire every single time because taking him early would have gotten her team killed. She had swallowed the shot that would have made her a legend over and over and waited in the cold and the dark for a better moment, a moment that served the men below instead of her own name. Emily, he said, how bad are you hurt? A silence that told him more than any answer. Emily, I'm hurt enough that I'm not walking out of here on my own, she said finally. Plainly no drama in it. Left leg's bad. I took some of the slope with me when it came down, and I've been dragging it for 3 days. I've got maybe one more good position in me, and then I'm done. So we're going to make it count. Here's what's going to happen, Chief, and I need you to trust me because you're not going to like the first part. I'm listening. In about 90 seconds, I'm going to stand up. Say again, Bennett said, leaning into the radio. Ghost One, say that again because it sounded like you said you're going to stand up and no sniper on earth stands up in the middle of them. I'm going to stand up, Carter said, in a place where every one of them can see me, and they're going to see one wounded American on a ridge with a rifle, and every gun in this valley is going to turn to face me because that's what men like these do. They can't help it. They see one target and they forget everything else. And while they are all looking at me, a breath, they are not going to be looking at what I've been building for 2 days. What have you been building? Hayes said slowly. Their own ammunition caches, their fallback routes. I've had 2 days and nothing to do but crawl and plan. I rigged every one of their staging points with the demo I had left and everything I could scavenge off the men I dropped in the first day. When they run, and they will run, because that's the other thing men like these do the moment it turns, they run for the routes they trust. And those routes, she let it hang. Those routes aren't going to my there. Nobody in the pocket said a word. Hayes looked at his 3 men and he saw the same thing on every face, the thing he was feeling in his own chest, a welled in painful and disbelieving hope. The first hope any of them had felt in 3 days. That's insane, Jake whispered. That's completely insane. She's going to make herself a target so they forget about us and then blow their exits when they run. That's, Chief, that could actually work. It could get her killed, Bennett said. It could get her killed, Hayes agreed and keyed the radio. Ghost One, negative on the exposure. You don't stand up and let a valley full of shooters range on you. That's not a plan, that's a suicide note. We find another way. We wait for her. Wait for what, Michael? Her voice was gentle now, and that gentleness was worse than any argument because it was the gentleness of someone who had already decided. Wait for the air support that isn't coming. Wait for the exfil nobody's sending because nobody knows we're alive. Wait for Walker's clock to run out. I've been counting his time from up here, same as Bennett's been counting it down there. We don't have another way. We have this way. We have the way where I do the one thing I'm good at, and I get you home. Emily, I made the kid a promise, Chief. Her voice caught just slightly, the only crack she let show in 3 days of iron. First week he was on the team. Scared out of his mind, I told him I'd get him home. I don't break promises to my team. I have never broken a promise to my team, and I'm not going to start tonight because you're worried about me. So here's what you're going to do. When the shooting starts, and it's going to start big, you get your men low, and you get ready to move because there is going to be a window, and it is going to be narrow. And when it opens, you are going to run for the north draw, and I am going to cover you every step of the way. Do you understand me? Hayes gripped the radio and did not answer because to answer was to agree, and to agree was to send her up onto that ridge alone. Michael, softer still, look at your men, look at them and tell me we have a better option. I'll wait. He looked at them. He looked at Jake, whose hands could fix anything but the situation they were in. He looked at Bennett, whose skill had bought Walker 3 days he shouldn't have had and couldn't buy him a fourth. He looked at Walker, 24 gray, fading, still whispering her name like a prayer. And he looked at the 11 rounds in his own rifle, 11 rounds against a valley, and he understood that she was right and that the worst part of command was not the moment you had no answer. The worst part of command was the moment when someone else had the answer, and the answer was that they would spend themselves to save the rest, and all you could do was let them. Chief, Walker said, and his voice was so thin now it was barely there. Let her, please. She knows what she's doing. She always knows what she's doing. Let her get us home. Hayes bowed his head over the radio. Ghost 1, he said, and his voice was steady again. Steady because he made it so. Because that was the last thing he could give her. This is Alpha Actual. You are cleared to execute. But you listen to me, Emily Carter, and you hear this. You get us home, and then you come down off that ridge, and you come home too. That's not a request. That's an order from your chief. You do not get to save this team and then not walk out with it. Do you copy? A long pause. Static. And then her voice, and he could hear the smile in it, the tired, unbreakable smile of a woman who had already made peace with whatever the next hour held. I hear you, Chief, she said. I'll do my best. That's not a yes. It's the best I've got. Now get your men ready. This is going to happen fast, and once it starts, it doesn't stop until it's finished. A breath. 90 seconds. Watch the far slope. When you see them all turn north, you'll know I'm up. And Chief, go ahead. Tell Walker. Her voice wavered just once and steadied. Tell Walker I keep my promises. The radio went quiet. Hayes lowered it slowly. Around him, 3 men were staring at him, and out beyond the rocks, a valley full of enemies were shouting and scrambling and trying to understand who had just killed 4 of their men and sent their leader diving for cover. And somewhere high on a shattered ridge to the north, a wounded woman was gathering herself to stand up in front of all of them. Marcus, Hayes said quietly, get Walker ready to move. Rig a drag. When that window opens, we're going for the north draw, and we are not stopping for anything, you understand me? Not for anything. Copy, Chief. Jake, that radio stays with you. If she can reach us, I want to be able to reach her back, and I want you ready to run. Copy. Daniel, Hayes crawled back to the boy close and put a hand on his shoulder. You hear all that? I heard it, Chief. The kid's eyes found his in the dark, and there was something in them that hadn't been there an hour ago. There was a reason to hold on. She came back for us. She came back for us, Hayes said. So you don't get to quit. Not now, not after what she's about to do. You quit on me now, and every bit of what she's spending up on that ridge is wasted. You understand she's about to lay everything down for you. The least you can do is stay alive long enough to let her. Walker's jaw tightened. Some color that Hayes would have sworn the boy didn't have left in him came up into his face. I'm not going anywhere, Chief, Walker said. I'm going home. She promised. Hayes squeezed his shoulder and turned back to the valley, and he brought his rifle up and he settled his 11 rounds against his cheek. And he waited and he watched the far slope, and he counted the way he counted everything now, and somewhere in the counting, he found himself doing something he had not done in a very long time. He found himself praying, not for himself, for her, for the woman on the ridge who had spent 3 days being dead so her team could live, and who was 90 seconds from standing up to prove she never had been. Out across the valley, the shouting shifted. Hayes felt it before he saw it, a change in the current of it, 100 voices swinging in one direction like iron filings turning to a magnet. And then he saw them, the shapes along the ridgeline, the men around the fallen machine gun, the figures scrambling near Khalid's command position, all of them turning all of them, looking all of them, raising their weapons toward one point high on the broken northern ridge. They had seen her, and there where 3 days ago the mountain had come down and buried a woman that 8 men had left for dead, a single figure rose up out of the rocks and stood wounded and swaying and utterly unafraid, silhouetted against the last light in the whole valley, a rifle in her hands and every enemy gun already swinging to face her. Hayes's breath stopped in his chest. Every weapon in the valley was turning north. Every eye, every barrel, turning away from four-cornered Americans and toward one woman who had just made herself the most visible target in the world, which meant that not one of them was looking anywhere else. Not one of them was looking at the caches she'd rigged. Not one of them was watching the routes they'd run for when it turned. Not one of them in that frozen instant understood that the wounded ghost on the ridge had not stood up to fight them. She had stood up to make them forget everything but her. And Michael Hayes, watching from the rocks with 11 rounds and 3 living men in a valley about to come apart, understood at last what she had meant back in Virginia 6 months and a lifetime ago, when he'd asked her what she'd do if everything fell apart, and she'd looked at him without a trace of doubt and given him an answer he hadn't been ready to believe. "I find a way to get everybody home." She was up. The trap was set, and the last light was going out of the sky. The first burst came a half second after she stood, and it was not one gun, but a dozen. The whole ridgeline opening up at once, a wall of noise rolling across the valley toward the single figure on the northern rocks. Hayes flinched at the sound of it, his whole body bracing for the sight of her going down, and he heard Jake beside him make a strangled sound low in his throat. But she was already gone. That was the thing none of them expected. She had stood, she had let them see her. She had let every barrel in the valley swing to face her, and in the instant before the first rounds arrived, she had dropped back into the rocks like water pouring into a crack, and the entire storm of fire tore through empty air where a woman had been standing a heartbeat before. "She's down," Bennett breathed. "Chief, is she hit? Is she?" The radio answered him. "I'm fine." Carter's voice tight, moving, and under it Hayes could hear the sound of her dragging herself across stone. "That's exactly what I wanted them to do. Every one of them just told me where they are. Now, Chief, this is the window, not the big one, not yet, but they're all leaning north and they're all reloading, and for the next 20 seconds, nobody's watching your slope. Move Walker to the second position, the one behind the fallen rocks, the one I told you about. Do it now." "You never told me about a second position," Hayes said, already moving, already grabbing the drag strap Bennett had rigged. "I'm telling you now, 40 feet to your left behind the big collapsed shelf. There's dead ground there, a fold they can't see into from the ridge. I've been looking at it for 2 days wishing you were in it. Move." They moved. Bennett took Walker's shoulders and Hayes took the strap, and Jake covered them with a rifle that had almost nothing in it, and they hauled the wounded man 40 feet across broken ground while a valley full of enemies stared the wrong way, and it was the longest 40 feet of Hayes's life, every foot of it, expecting the fire to swing back. And it didn't, because she was right. They were all looking north, all of them hunting for the ghost that had already moved. They slid into the fold behind the collapsed shelf, and Hayes felt the difference immediately. The angle changed. The ridgeline that had owned them for 3 days couldn't reach into this pocket. For the first time since the mountain came down, they were not exposed. "We're in," Hayes said into the radio, breathing hard. "We're in the second position. How did you, Emily? How did you know this was here?" "Because that's my job, Chief." Her voice had gone flat and cold. The voice he remembered from the range in Virginia, the voice of a woman doing the one thing in the world she was built for. "You spend 3 days watching a valley, you learn every fold and every shadow in it. I've had nothing to do but watch and count and wait. I know this ground better than they do now. That's the only advantage we've got, and we're going to use every inch of it." 60 seconds ago you were dead," Jake said, half to himself, staring at the radio. 60 seconds ago, I'd have bet my life you were under that mountain." "I nearly was." A grunt of effort. Hayes could hear her repositioning, the scrape of the rifle, the drag of the ruined leg. First shot dropped their machine gunner. That bought you your lives, because that gun was 30 seconds from ending all of you. But it also told them somebody's up here. So now they've got a choice. Come up after me, or pull back and regroup. And I need to make that choice for them. "Make it how?" Hayes said. "By making staying more expensive than leaving." And then she went to work, and Hayes heard it happen through the radio and saw it happen across the valley at the same time, and for the rest of his life, he would tell people that he had never in 20 years of war seen anything like the next 4 minutes. The shots came slow at first, spaced, deliberate, One report of a pause of 10 or 12 seconds, another report, and each time a shape on the ridgeline fell and did not get up. She was not spraying. She was not panicking. She was picking them apart one careful piece at a time, the way a surgeon takes something apart. And the spacing between the shots was itself a weapon, because every long silence between them was a silence in which 24 frightened men waited to find out which of them was next. She's taking her time, Bennett said, and there was something like awe in it. She's got them terrified. Listen to them. They could all hear it now drifting across the valley, the enemy shouting to one another, and the note in the voices had changed again. On the first night, it had been the confidence of men closing a trap. An hour ago, it had been the bloodlust of men about to finish it. Now it was something else entirely. Now it was the sound of men who had realized they were being killed one at a time by something they could not find and could not stop and could not run from. And that sound Hayes knew was the beginning of the end for them, if she could push it just a little further. Ghost One, Hayes said, talk to me. How many rounds do you have? A pause that lasted one shot longer than he liked. Enough, Carter said. Emily, how many? I said enough, Chief. Another report rolled across the valley, another shape folded on the ridge. Don't ask me the count. You don't need the count. I need you to trust me, and I need you to keep your men ready, because in about 90 seconds, Khalid is going to make a decision, and when he makes it, everything changes. What decision? Whether to send men up my ridge to dig me out, or pull the whole force back to regroup and hit you again at dawn. And I know which one he's going to pick, because I've watched this man for 3 days, and I know exactly how his mind works. He's not going to leave a wounded American sniper alive on the high ground overnight. His pride won't let him. He's going to send a team up after me. She said it without a trace of fear, as if she were describing the weather. And that's what I want, because the moment they commit men to come up this ridge, they thin out the line around you. And the moment the line thins, your window opens. Hayes understood then all at once the full shape of what she was doing, and it took his breath away. She wasn't just covering them. She was manipulating the entire enemy force, moving them like pieces, using her own body as the bait to draw them into the one arrangement that would let 4 wounded men escape. She had made herself the most valuable target in the valley on purpose, so that Khalid would spend his strength trying to kill her instead of them. You're going to draw them up onto your ridge, Hayes said slowly. You're going to let them come after you, alone, wounded, so we can slip out the back. Now you're getting it, Chief. And when they reach you, silence. Emily, when they reach you, what happens to you? Let me worry about that part, she said. You worry about getting Walker to the north draw. Now here's the timing, and you have to be exact because I can only do this once. When you hear a big explosion, not a rifle shot, a real blast, that's their eastern fallback, cash going up. That's your signal. The second you hear it, you move and you move hard and you go north and you don't stop and you don't look back no matter what you hear behind you. Do you understand me? No matter what you hear. Hayes gripped the radio. Chief, her voice sharpened. I need to hear you say it, no matter what you hear behind you. I don't like it, Hayes said. You don't have to like it, you have to do it. Say it back to me. No matter what we hear behind us, Hayes said, and the words tasted like ash because he understood what she was really asking. She was telling him that whatever happened to her, he was to keep moving. She was telling him not to come back for her. She was telling him in the only way she'd allow herself to say it goodbye. Good, Carter said softly. That's my chief. And then the radio went quiet, and across the valley, the shots kept coming slow and cold and terrible. And Hayes watched the enemy line on the eastern slope begin to peel away, men moving north, gathering at the base of the shattered ridge, forming up to climb after the ghost who was killing them. It was working. God help them all. It was working exactly the way she'd said it would. Chief, Walker whispered from the dead ground where Bennett had laid him. His voice was almost gone now, but his eyes were open and fixed on Hayes with a terrible clarity. She's not planning to come out, is she? I can hear it in how she's talking. She's not planning to walk off that ridge. Hayes looked at the boy and could not lie to him. He had never been able to lie. Everyone said so. Carter had said so, and he could not start now, not with this. She's planning to get you home, Hayes said. That's all she's planning. Everything else she'll figure out on the way. That's what she does. That's not an answer, Chief. It's the best I've got, kid. And Hayes heard his own voice give her words back, the same words she'd given him in Virginia, and something in his chest twisted so hard he had to look away. On the northern ridge, the first of Khalid's men began to climb. There were maybe 8 of them, moving in a loose file up the broken slope, using the fallen rock for cover, working toward the position where they'd last seen the muzzle flash. They were careful. They were good. They knew they were hunting something dangerous, and they moved like it. And high above them, hidden in the rocks, a wounded woman watched them come and did not fire because a single shot now would only tell them exactly where she was, and she wanted them closer. She wanted them committed. She wanted all 8 of them up on that ridge and away from the valley floor before she did anything at all. "They're climbing," Bennett said. He'd crawled up to where he could see. Chief 8 of them, maybe more, forming up behind. "They're going up after her." "Get back down here," Hayes said. "Get ready to move Walker." "She's just letting them come. She's not shooting." "Why isn't she shooting?" "Because she's waiting for all of them," Hayes said. "Get down here, Marcus. When that cash blows, we go." Bennett slid back down into the fold and took his position at Walker's shoulders, and Jake gripped his rifle, and Hayes coiled himself against the rock and watched the eastern slope, where the enemy line was thinnest, now thinned exactly as she'd promised, a gap opening between the men who'd gone north after her and the men still holding the valley floor. And through that gap ran the north draw, and through the north draw ran the only road home any of them had. The 8 climbers reached the halfway point of the ridge. Carter still didn't fire. "Come on," Jake breathed. "Come on, Carter, take them. They're right there. Why aren't you?" And then Hayes understood, a half second before it happened, why she wasn't shooting the climbers. Because the climbers weren't the point. The climbers were just the bait she was using to bait her own bait. She needed them up on that ridge, exposed, strung out on the open rock, so that when she finally moved, she wouldn't be taking 8 men. She'd be taking 8 men and everyone who came after them all at once in the place of her choosing. "She's not going to shoot them," Hayes said. "She's going to bring the ridge down on them, the same way it came down on her. She's been up there for 3 days alone with demolition charges and nothing to do but plan. She rigged the slope." Bennett stared at him. "You mean I mean the mountain that buried her 3 days ago is about to bury them," Hayes said. "Get ready. This is it. This is the window." The 8 climbers reached the upper third of the ridge, where the rock was steepest and the footing worst, exactly where a careful hunter would funnel them if she'd had 3 days to think about it. And they bunched up there the way men do on bad ground, drawing close together to help each other over the difficult stretch. And for one perfect moment, all 8 of them were in the same 40 feet of shattered slope. The radio crackled. "Chief," Carter's voice, and it was different now, stripped down, final. "This is it. When it goes, you go. Remember what you promised me, no matter what you hear." "Emily, I keep my promises, Chief," she said. "Tell Walker." And then the world came apart. It was not one explosion. It was a chain of them running up the ridge in a rippling line, each blast triggering the next. And the whole upper third of the slope simply lifted and shrugged and slid tons of broken rock that she had loosened and rigged and waited 3 days to release. And it came down on the 8 climbing men in a roaring gray avalanche that swallowed them whole and did not leave so much as a cry behind. And below on the valley floor, the shock wave and the sight of it froze every enemy who saw it, because their comrades had gone up that ridge to kill one wounded woman, and the mountain itself had answered. "Move!" Hayes roared. "North draw now, go, go, go!" They went. Bennett took Walker's shoulders, and Hayes took the strap, and Jake ran ahead with his rifle up, and they poured out of the dead ground and into the north draw, and behind them the valley was chaos. The enemy screaming, some firing wildly at the ridge, some firing at nothing, all of them shattered by the thing they'd just witnessed, none of them for those crucial seconds watching the 4 Americans slipping out the back. And a second explosion went up off to the east. The fallback cache she'd rigged exactly as she'd promised, and it blew the enemy's ammunition and their confidence and their organization all at once. And the retreat routes she'd sabotaged began to go one after another, thunder rolling around the valley. And what had been an army 20 minutes ago became a mob of terrified men running in every direction at once, running for exits that exploded as they reached them, running from a ghost on a ridge who had turned their own valley into a killing ground. Hayes ran and hauled Walker and did not look back. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. Every instinct in him screamed to turn around to go back up that draw, to climb the broken ridge and find her and carry her out on his own shoulders. But she had made him promise, and she had made him say it back, and she had known exactly why she'd made him do it, because she'd known he would want to come back, and she'd known that coming back would waste everything, and she had loved her team too much to let him. Chief, Walker gasped as they ran the drag strap, biting the boy white with pain. But alive, alive. The shooting stopped. On the ridge, it stopped. Chief, why did it stop? Save your strength, kid. Her rifle stopped, Chief. She's not shooting anymore. Why isn't she? Because she's out of targets, or she's out of rounds, or she's moving, Hayes said, and made himself believe it because the alternative was to stop, and he could not stop. Now save your strength. We're almost to the mouth of the draw. They ran. The valley thundered behind them. And somewhere in the running, Jake up ahead skidded to a halt and threw up a fist, and Hayes nearly ran into him. Chief, Jake said, and his voice had gone strange. Chief, look. Hayes looked. Ahead of them, where the north draw opened onto a wider stretch of ground, 3 men were coming toward them. Not enemy. He knew it in an instant, the way you know your own, even at a distance, the way they moved the gear, the discipline. 3 men in the same uniform he wore. And behind them the sound Hayes had stopped letting himself hope for in 3 days, the deep, familiar thunder of rotors coming in low and fast from the north. That's ours, Bennett said, and his voice cracked completely. Chief, that's ours. That's a bird. That's exfil. How is there exfil? Nobody knows where. Somebody knew, Hayes said, and understanding hit him all at once, and it hit him so hard he almost went to his knees. Somebody told them. Because there was only one way an exfil bird was inbound to a valley that command believed held nothing but bodies. Only one way anyone back at base knew where to send it. Someone had gotten a signal out. Someone had reached the world beyond this valley across dead comms and jammed frequencies in 3 days of silence and told them exactly where 4 dying men could be found. The radio, Jake breathed, staring down at the unit on his own chest. The dead radio he'd bled over for 70 hours, the radio that had crackled to life with her voice. She didn't just reach us. Chief, if she could reach us on this, then she rerouted through. She used our signal to relay out. She's been building a link for 2 days. She didn't just watch the valley. She built a way to call for help, and she saved it. She held it until the exact moment. Until she had us moving, Hayes said. Until she knew we'd make the draw. She called the bird, and then she stood up on that ridge to buy us the time for it to arrive. The 3 operators reached them, and there was no time for questions. Only hands, taking Walker's weight, hands pulling them forward, a voice shouting over the rotor wash that the bird was 2 minutes out, and they had to move to the pickup. Move. And Hayes moved, carried along in the sudden, overwhelming rush of rescue, of survival, of the impossible becoming real. And it was only when they reached the open ground and he saw the helicopter flaring into land that he stopped and turned and looked back at the ridge. The valley was quiet now. The explosions had stopped. The enemy that had owned this place for 3 days was gone, scattered, broken, running through the mountains in every direction. And high on the shattered northern ridge, where a woman had stood up in front of an army so that 4 men could live there, was nothing. No muzzle flash, no movement, no figure against the fading light. Where is she? Hayes said. He grabbed the nearest of the 3 operators by the vest. The sniper, the one who called this in, Ghost 1. Where is she? Did you make contact? Is she? The operator's face told him before the words did. We got a relay signal, the man shouted over the rotors. Coordinates and a distress call patched through your team frequency. Whoever sent it saved your lives. Chief, that signal is the only reason we knew you were down here. But we never raised the sender directly. The signal cut out about 4 minutes ago. Right around when the ridge came down. 4 minutes ago. Right around when she'd told him, this is it. Right around when she'd said, tell Walker. Right around when she'd brought the mountain down on 8 men and blown their caches and turned the valley inside out. The signal had cut out at the exact moment she'd spent everything she had left. No, Hayes said. No, she's up there. She's alive. She said she'd come down. I gave her an order. She said she'd try. She's up there, and she's hurt, and she can't walk, and we are not leaving without her. Do you hear me? We are not. Chief, Bennett had a hand on his arm. Chief, look at me. Get your hand off me, Marcus. We're going back up that ridge. Chief, Bennett's voice broke through, hard and level, the corpsman's voice. The voice that had kept Walker alive for 3 days on nothing but will. Listen to me. Walker's crashing. The run cost him. If we don't get him on that bird right now in the next 90 seconds, then everything she did up there, all of it, was for nothing. You hear me? You go back up that ridge alone, wounded at night in enemy country, and you die, and Walker dies waiting for you. And the last thing she ever did with her life gets thrown away. Is that what she'd want? Is that the promise you made her? Hayes stood frozen between the ridge and the helicopter, between the woman who might still be alive, up there in the dark, and the boy who was surely dying at his feet. And it was the cruelest choice a man had ever put in front of him. And he understood in that moment that this was the choice she had spent 3 days arranging so that he would never have to make it. She had called the bird. She had timed the ridge. She had built the whole thing, every piece of it, so that the window would open and the exfil would come, and there would be no reason on God's earth for Michael Hayes to turn around, and she had made him promise, no matter what you hear, because she had known all along that it would come to exactly this. Chief, Walker whispered from the ground, and his voice was the thinnest thread. Now almost nothing but his eyes were open and fixed on Hayes with the last of his strength. She said she'd get me home. Don't make it a lie. Please, Chief, get me home. That's how she wins. If I make it home, that's how she wins. And that broke him. That finally broke Michael Hayes. Get him on the bird, he heard himself say, and his voice did not sound like his own. Get everybody on the bird, now. They ran the last stretch to the helicopter, hands everywhere. Lifting Walker, lifting Bennett, lifting Jake, and his precious dead radio that had turned out not to be dead at all. And Hayes came last, and at the ramp he stopped one more time, and turned one more time and looked one more time up at the ridge, and he cupped his hands, and he screamed her name into the roar of the rotors, screamed it with everything he had. Emily and the wind took it, and the mountains swallowed it, and nothing answered. Chief, one of the crew shouted, we have to go. We're taking fire from the eastern slope. We have to go now. Hands pulled him aboard. The ramp came up. The bird lifted and the valley fell away beneath them, dark and silent and littered with the wreckage of an army. And Hayes pressed himself to the open door and stared down at the shrinking ridge until the darkness swallowed it whole, and he could not see it anymore. And even then he did not look away. Beside him, Bennett worked over Walker in the red light of the cabin, fast and desperate. An IV, line of fresh dressing, the good stuff from the bird's kit that Bennett had run out of days ago. And Hayes watched the boy's face, and the boy's face stayed gray and slack. And Hayes thought with a dread that reached all the way to the bottom of him, that after everything, after all of it, they might lose him anyway. That she might have spent her life for nothing. That the promise might die on this cabin floor 200 feet in the air. Come on, kid, Bennett was saying over and over, his hands moving. Come on, Daniel, stay with me. She didn't do all that for you to quit on me now. Stay with me. Stay with me. And Jake sat against the bulkhead with the radio in his lap, staring at it, and suddenly he sat up straight. Chief, his voice was strange. Chief, the radio? Not now, Jake. Chief, the radio's got a signal. Hayes turned. Jake was holding the unit up, and the little indicator, the one that had been dead for 70 hours, the one that had crackled to life once with her voice and gone silent again, was lit. Faint, flickering, fighting through the rotor noise in the distance and the interference, but lit. Somebody's transmitting, Jake said. Somebody on our frequency. It's weak, it's real weak, it's breaking up. But somebody's, Chief, somebody's still down there, somebody's still. Hayes lunged across the cabin and seized the radio and keyed it and pressed it to his ear and shouted into it over the roar of the rotors. Ghost 1, this is Alpha. Actual, do you copy? Come in, Emily. Come in, come in. Static. A wall of it, and under the static buried so deep, he thought at first he was imagining it, so faint it might have been the wind or his own desperate wanting a sound. A voice, a single word broken almost past recognition, fading in and out, reaching up 200 feet through the dark to a man who had left her behind because she'd made him promise to. And the word was his name, Michael. The word again thinner than the first time, chewed apart by static, but his name unmistakably, his name in her voice. Michael, if you can, hear me. I hear you. Hayes pressed the radio so hard against the side of his head, it left a mark he'd find hours later. Emily, I hear you. I'm here, I'm right here, talk to me. Where are you? Are you moving? Can you move? Turn the bird around. Static swallowed the rest. Say again, Ghost One, say again, you're breaking up. He's alive, Michael. The words came in pieces, each one costing her something Hayes could hear. Khalid, he's alive. He wasn't on the ridge. He pulled back. Before the blast. The cabin seemed to tilt under Hayes. He looked up sharply and Jake and Bennett had gone still. Both of them staring at him, both of them having heard. Say that again, Hayes said into the radio, slow, careful, the blood gone cold in his veins. Emily, Omar Khalid is alive. He's alive! Clearer now for one terrible moment, clearer as if she'd gathered everything she had left to make sure this one thing got through. He pulled his personal guard back before I dropped the ridge. He knew. Somehow he knew. He's not dead, Michael, and he's not running. He's coming after you. He knows there's a bird. He heard it same as I did. He's got men on the eastern high ground with static. Launcher. Michael, he's got a launcher, and you're flying right over the radio screamed with interference, and then cutting under it, cutting through it, a new sound reached the cabin, a sound Hayes had heard before in other valleys on other nights, a sound that stopped his heart. The crew chief up front was shouting. The pilot's voice came over the internal net sharp and fast. Contact, contact, we've got a launch, eastern slope. Brace, brace, brace. The helicopter dropped. It fell out from under them like the floor of the world had opened, the pilot standing on the collective, flinging the aircraft down and sideways in a maneuver that threw every man in the cabin against his straps and threw Walker half off the litter and threw the radio out of Hayes' hand to skitter across the deck. Something went past the open door closed so close, Hayes felt the heat of it, a streak of fire that punched through the space the bird had occupied a half second before and detonated somewhere above and behind them in a flash that lit the whole cabin white. Missed, missed, keep her low, the pilot was shouting, and the bird clawed back level barely 30 feet off the valley floor, now screaming north. And Hayes was on his hands and knees scrambling for the radio, and Bennett was throwing himself across Walker to keep the boy on the litter, and Jake had both hands locked on a cargo strap and his eyes squeezed shut. Hayes got the radio. Emily, he shouted. Emily, we're hit. No, we're clear. We're clear. They missed. Where? Emily, do you copy? Nothing. Ghost One, do you copy? Nothing but static, and under the static, nothing at all. No, Hayes said. No, no, no. Emily, Emily, come back. Come in, come in. The static hissed and rolled and gave him nothing, and Hayes knelt there on the deck of the shuddering helicopter with the radio in both hands and felt the silence open up under him like the drop the pilot had just thrown them into. She had spent the last of her strength to warn them. She had held on wounded, dying alone on a broken ridge long enough to see the bird lift and long enough to see the danger it was flying into, and she had used what might have been her last breath not to call for help, not to say goodbye, but to save them one more time. And now she was gone from the air, and he did not know if it was because the launch had destroyed the relay she'd built or because it had destroyed her. Chief, the pilot's voice hard over the net. Chief, I need a decision, and I need it now. That launcher means they've got teams on the high ground, and they're tracking us. I can run north and get your wounded man to a surgeon in 40 minutes, or I can turn back into that valley and try to find your sniper. And if I turn back into that valley with a launcher active down there, I'm probably not flying any of us out. That's the truth, and you've got about 10 seconds to hear it. And there it was again, the choice. The same choice she had spent 3 days arranging so that he would never have to make it, and here it was anyway, come back around, because Omar Khalid was alive and had refused to let the story end the way she'd written it. Hayes looked at Walker. The boy was unconscious now, or nearly, Bennett's hands moving over him in the red light. And even in that light, Hayes could see the color was wrong, could see the shallow flutter of the boy's chest, could see that Marcus Bennett, who never showed anything, was scared. Chief, Bennett said without looking up, I can't hold him for 40 minutes. I'm telling you straight. He needs a table and blood and a surgeon, and he needs them fast, and every minute we're not flying north is a minute I might not get back. That's not me telling you what to do. That's me telling you the clock. Hayes looked at the radio in his hands, silent now. And he thought about the woman on the ridge who had said, "No matter what you hear behind you." He thought about how she'd made him say it back. He thought about how she had known. She had always known that it might come to a moment exactly like this one, a moment where turning back for her meant losing the boy she'd spent everything to save. And he understood that if he turned this bird around and Walker died in the turning, then Emily Carter's last act on this earth would have been wasted, and she would never forgive him for it, not in this life and not in the next. "Fly north," Hayes said. The words came out of him like something torn loose. "Say again, Chief." "Fly north," Hayes said louder, and his voice broke on it, and he did not care. "Get Walker to the surgeon. Fly north." "Copy," the pilot said quietly. "Flying north." And the helicopter steadied and climbed, and turned its nose to the north, and left the valley behind, left the ridge behind, left her behind. And Michael Hayes knelt on the deck with the dead radio in his hands, and bowed his head, and did the thing a chief is never supposed to do in front of his men, and none of them said a word. And Jake reached right over without a word and put a hand on his shoulder and left it there. And that was how they flew out of that valley, 4 men who had gone in as 8 carrying a boy who might not live, and the silence of a woman who had made all of it possible. 40 minutes later, they touched down at a forward surgical base, and the ramp came down, and a team was already running toward them across the pad, and they took Walker, lifted him gone in a rush of shouted vitals and pounding boots, and Bennett ran alongside the litter, still holding pressure, still talking to the boy, still refusing to let go all the way through the doors and out of sight. And Hayes stood on the pad in the rotor wash with the radio still in his hand and watched the doors swing shut, and for a long moment he had no idea what to do with his body, no orders to give, no man to save, nothing to do, but stand there and feel the full weight of the last 3 days come down on him all at once. "Chief," Jake was beside him. "Chief, we need to get you looked at. You're bleeding." "I'm fine." "You've been fine for 3 days. Let a doc tell you you're fine." "The radio," Hayes said. "Jake, the relay she built, can you get it working from here? A real station, real power. Can you reach her?" Jake took the radio, his hands the best hands in the unit, turned it over gently, and Hayes watched his face and saw the answer forming there before Jake said it. "Chief, the relay she built ran through my unit and hers linked together across the valley. If her end is gone, if her transmitter got hit by that launch, or if she's—" He couldn't finish it. "Then there's nothing on the other end to reach. It'd be like calling a phone that's been smashed. I can try. I'll try all night. But I need you to understand what the odds are." "I understand the odds," Hayes said. "Try anyway." "I will. I promise you I will." They took Hayes inside, and a doctor cleaned a wound in his side. He'd stopped feeling 2 days ago, and stitched it while Hayes stared at the wall and said nothing. And outside in a communications tent, Jake Reynolds sat down with the radio and a full power station and began the long work of trying to raise a ghost. And time passed, the strange stretched time of a base at night, and Hayes would not sleep, could not sleep, and he sat in a hard chair outside the surgical suite waiting for word on Walker, and would not move, no matter who told him to. It was near midnight, 3 hours after they'd landed, when the doors opened, and a surgeon came out pulling down his mask, and Hayes was on his feet before the man had taken 2 steps. "The young man," the surgeon said. "Walker." "Tell me." "He's alive." The surgeon rubbed his eyes. "I'll be straight with you, he shouldn't be. Whoever kept him going out there did impossible work. That kind of wound, 3 days in the field, no real supplies. He should have died on day 1. Somebody kept him alive with nothing but hands and stubbornness, and then somebody got him to me with about 10 minutes to spare. He's going to make it. He's got a long road, but he's going to make it. He's going to go home." Hayes closed his eyes. "He's going to go home." The exact words. The exact promise. She had said it to the kid his first week on the team, scared out of his mind, and she had said it again on the radio in the valley. "Tell Walker I keep my promises," and now a surgeon he'd never met had just said it back to him without knowing what he was saying, and Hayes had to put a hand against the wall. "There's more," the surgeon said gentler now. "The whole time he was going under, he kept saying a name over and over. He made me promise to tell you. He said, 'Tell the chief she got me home.' He said, 'Tell the chief Carter got me home.' Kept saying it until the anesthesia took him. I don't know who Carter is, but that young man believes with everything in him that she's the reason he's alive. I thought you'd want to know." She's the reason all of us are alive, Hayes said. Every one of us. Then I hope she made it too, the surgeon said, and went back through the doors. Hayes stood in the empty corridor for a long moment, and then he turned and walked fast toward the communications tent, because he could not sit still with that in his chest. Tell the Chief Carter got me home. He could not sit still with it. He had to do something, and the only thing left to do was find her. Jake looked up when he came in. The younger man's eyes were red-rimmed, and there was a cold cup of coffee at his elbow, and the radio sat in front of him with a dozen wires running out of it into the station, and Hayes saw on his face a mixture of exhaustion and something else, something that made his heart lurch. Chief, Jake said, sit down. I need to show you something, and I need you to not get your hopes up because I don't know what it is yet. What? Sit down, Chief, please. Hayes sat. Jake turned a dial and adjusted something, and out of the station's speaker came a sound. Static mostly, a long wash of it. But underneath the static, buried in it, faint and regular, there was a pulse, a rhythm. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, over and over, endlessly, mechanically, the same pattern repeating, with a patience no wounded, exhausted human hand could manage. That's not a voice, Jake said. It's a beacon, an automated distress pulse. It's the emergency function on her transmitter, the one that keeps sending even if the operator can't. It kicks on automatically when the unit takes damage or when the operator stops responding. It runs on its own. It'll run until the battery dies. He swallowed. I've been listening to it for an hour. It came up about 40 minutes after we landed, which means her transmitter is damaged or she's unconscious or... He stopped. But Chief, listen to me. It also means the transmitter is intact enough to send. It means it wasn't destroyed by that launch. It means it's sitting somewhere down in that valley, still powered, still running. And a transmitter that's still running is a transmitter somebody can go find. Hayes stared at the speaker. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The oldest signal in the world. The one that means the same thing in every language, in every darkness. Help me. I'm here. Come find me. Can you get a location off it? He said. I've been working on it. It's faint and it's bouncing around those slopes, but yeah, I can get a fix. I can get you close. Jake looked at him. But Chief, that's the good news, and here's the rest of it. I ran the timeline. That beacon came on 40 minutes after we lifted off. 40 minutes. She was still talking to us in the air, warning us about the launcher, and then the beacon came on 40 minutes later. Which means for 40 minutes after we left, she was still conscious, still working, still doing something. And then she stopped, and the automatic beacon took over. Whatever she was doing in those 40 minutes, she was alive to do it. She was alive after we left Chief. For at least 40 minutes, she was alive. The word alive went through Hayes like current. When was that fix, he said. What time did the beacon start? 2300, about an hour ago. Hayes did the math the way he did all math now, cold and fast. An hour ago, the beacon had started, which meant an hour ago she'd stopped responding, which meant she'd been alive at least until then, which meant that right now, this minute, there was a chance, a real chance, that a woman was lying somewhere on a broken ridge in enemy country with a wound she'd carried for 3 days unconscious or too weak to key a radio in a machine beside her, calling out into the dark for anyone to come. He stood up. Get me the location, he said. Get me command. I'm putting together a team, and I'm going back into that valley tonight. Chief, tonight, Jake. Chief, it's Khalid's valley right now. He's alive. He's got a launcher. He's got whatever's left of his men, and command wrote that whole grid off 3 days ago. They are not going to authorize a bird back into that airspace for a beacon that might just be a damaged transmitter on a body. You know they're not. Then I'll go without a bird. You can't walk 40 miles in to watch me. Chief, Jake was on his feet now too. Stop. Just stop for 1 second. I want to go back for her more than anything in the world. Do you understand me? She saved my life. She saved all our lives. I will crawl back into that valley on my hands and knees if that's what it takes. But you going off half-cocked and getting yourself killed doesn't save her. It just adds your name to the list. She didn't do all this so you could throw your life away chasing a signal. So sit down and let's do this right. And let's build something that actually gets her back instead of something that gets us both dead. Can you do that for her? Can you do that? Hayes stood there breathing hard, every muscle in him screaming to move, to go, to run back into the dark and find her. And through it, slowly Jake's words reached him. Because they were her words. They were exactly the kind of thing she would have said. Do it right, don't waste it. And he made himself sit back down. Okay, Hayes said. Okay, we do it right. Get me the location. Get me command. And Jake, he looked at the younger man. Thank you for not giving up on her, for working that radio all night. She'd have done it for me, Jake said simply. She'd have done it for any of us. That's the whole point of her, Chief. That's the whole point of Haman. And so they went to command in the dead middle of the night, Hayes and Jake and Bennett, who had appeared at the tent door still in his bloody gear, having refused to sleep, the three of them standing in front of a duty officer and a satellite map and making the case for a rescue into a valley that the entire chain of command had already declared a loss. And it went exactly as badly as Jake had said it would. The duty officer was sympathetic and immovable. The grid was hot. The sender was probably a machine. There was no authorization for an aircraft, no authorization for a team, no appetite anywhere in the chain for risking live men on a beacon that in all likelihood marked a body. The mission was over. The operation was closed. He was sorry. He was genuinely sorry. But the answer was no. And Hayes stood in front of that map and felt the last door in the world start to swing shut, and he opened his mouth to argue, to beg, to do whatever it took. And before he could get a word out, the radio in Jake's hand, the beacon they'd routed to a handheld so they could keep listening, changed. The pulse stopped. Everyone in the tent heard it, the sudden absence of the 3 and 3 and 3 that had been running under everything, and Jake fumbled the radio up and turned it, and there was a beat of pure silence that felt like the bottom dropping out of the world, and Hayes thought, that's it. That's the battery. That's the end. And then a voice came out of it, weak, exhausted, barely there, but awake, alive, human. Any station? This frequency. A ragged breath. This is Ghost One. I've got eyes on Omar Khalid. He's alive. He's got maybe 20 men and a launcher, and he is moving north out of the valley, toward the base, toward you. Another breath, and Hayes could hear her fighting to stay conscious for every word. He knows there's an American base within reach, and he knows you've got wounded here, and he is coming to finish it. I can see his whole column. I'm the only one who can, and I have maybe one more chance to stop him, but I can't do it alone. Not this time. Michael, if you can hear me, I need you. I finally need you, please. The tent had gone dead silent. The duty officer, the man who had just said no to everything, stood staring at the radio with his face gone pale because a mission he'd declared a loss had just called in a real-time report of a known high-value target moving a hostile force toward an American installation. And that was not a beacon, that was not a body, that was a living asset with eyes on a threat, and everything about the calculation had just changed. Hayes crossed the tent and took the radio from Jake's hands and keyed it, and when he spoke, his voice was steady as stone, the voice of a chief, the voice she needed to hear. Ghost One, this is Alpha Actual. He looked the duty officer dead in the eye as he said it. I hear you, Emily. I hear you loud and clear. Hold your position. Hold on, because I am coming to get you, and this time I am bringing everyone. The duty officer moved before Hayes even finished speaking. Whatever wall of protocol had stood in that tent 30 seconds ago was gone, blown flat by 4 words. Eyes on Omar Khalid, because a beacon on a body was a judgment call. A man could defend, but a living operator reporting a named target moving a hostile column toward a base full of wounded Americans was not a judgment call at all. It was the whole reason the chain of command existed. Get me the watch commander, the duty officer was already saying into a phone. Wake him, I don't care. Tell him we've got a live Overwatch asset with eyes on the primary target from the closed op, and the target is moving on us. Yes, that target. He's alive. A pause. I'm aware of what the reports said. The reports were wrong. Hayes keyed the radio again, and his voice dropped low and private, meant for one person across 40 miles of dark mountains. Emily, stay with me. Talk to me. How bad are you? Bad enough. Her voice came thin and slow, each word set down carefully like she was afraid of spending too many. I'm not going to lie to you anymore, Michael. I'm done lying to you. The leg's gone bad. I've lost a lot of blood. I've been holding it together with a tourniquet and spite for 3 days, and the spite's running low. A sound that might have been a laugh, might have been a cough. But I can see him. That's what matters. I've got the whole column in my glass. 20, maybe 22 men. The launcher. And Khalid right in the middle walking like he owns the mountain. He thinks he won Michael. He thinks he wiped out an American team, and now he's going to hit a base and finish the night as a legend. He's not going to touch that base, Hayes said. You hear me? He's not getting near it. He is if somebody doesn't stop that column before it clears the North Pass. Once he's through the pass, he's got 3 routes to choose from in open ground, and you'll never find him in time. A breath, Io. There's one place to stop him, Michael. The pass itself, it's a bottleneck. The whole column has to funnel through it single file, and there's high ground on the western side that looks straight down into it. Whoever holds that high ground holds the whole column. One shooter up there could pin 20 men in that pass for as long as the ammunition holds. And you're telling me this because, Hayes said slowly, and he already knew, God help him, he already knew. Because I'm on the western high ground, now, Carter said. I dragged myself up here after you left. Took me most of the night. That's what I was doing in those 40 minutes before the beacon kicked on. I wasn't dying, Michael. I was climbing. I knew if he came out of that valley, he'd come through this pass, and I knew somebody had to be up here when he did, so I climbed. And now I'm here, and he's coming, and I've got maybe 30 rounds in one leg, and I am going to hold this pass until you get here, or until I can't. The tent had gone silent around Hayes. Every man in it was listening now. The duty officer with the phone still at his ear, and they were hearing the same thing Hayes was hearing, a wounded woman on a mountain calmly explaining how she intended to stand alone against 20 armed men because there was no one else to do it. No, Hayes said. Emily, listen to me. You do not engage that column alone. You are hurt. You are out of blood. And 30 rounds against 20 men with a launcher is not a fight. It's a... He stopped himself before he said it. You hold your position and you stay hidden and you let them pass and you keep reporting, and we will hit them on the north side of the pass with everything we've got. You do not have to do this alone. Not this time. That's the whole reason you called me. Let me bring the cavalry. How far out are you? Carter said. Hayes looked at the duty officer. The duty officer covered the phone and said low, Quick reaction force can be wheels up in 20 minutes. Flight time to the pass, another 25. Call it 45 minutes best case to have boots on that high ground. 45 minutes. 45 minutes, Hayes said into the radio. The silence on the other end told him everything. Michael? Carter's voice was gentle now, that terrible gentleness again, the one that meant she'd already done the math and already made the decision. The head of his column hits the mouth of the pass in about 8. 8 minutes, 45 minutes of help, 8 minutes of column. They'll be through the pass and gone in 12, she said. By the time your reaction force gets here, there won't be anything to react to. He'll be scattered across 3 valleys, and your base will be his next stop tomorrow. Or the night after, whenever he regroups. This is the window, Michael. This is the only window. It closes in 8 minutes, and I'm the only one standing in it. Then let it close. The words tore out of him louder than he meant, and every head in the tent turned, and he didn't care. Let him go, Emily. Let him walk through that pass. We'll hunt him down. We'll get him another day. I am not trading you for Omar Khalid. Do you understand me? I am not. You've done enough. You have done more than any 10 people I've ever served with. You got the whole team out. You got Walker to a surgeon. He's alive. Emily Walker's alive. He came out of surgery an hour ago, and the first thing he did was make the doctor promise to tell me you got him home. You kept your promise. It's kept. It's done. So you do not get to spend what's left of you holding a mountain pass. Not for him, not for anybody. You let him go, and you hold on, and you wait for me. That's an order. That is a direct order from your chief. There was a long silence. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Something had come into it. Something raw, something she'd been holding back for 3 days behind all that iron calm. Walker's alive, she said. He's alive. He's going to make it. Because of you. A sound came through the radio then that Hayes had never heard from her. Not in 6 months, not through any of it, a small broken sound, and he realized she was crying quietly the way a person cries when they've been holding something up for too long and someone finally tells them they can set it down. That's all I wanted, she said. That's the only thing I wanted this whole time, just to get the kid home. You don't know Michael. You don't know what these 3 days have been, lying up on that first ridge with my leg torn open, watching you all get chewed up down there, having Khalid in my sights 6 times and holding fire every time because taking him would have gotten you killed. Do you understand what that costs to have the man right there, the man we came for, and to let him live over and over because your team matters more than the target? I have wanted to take that shot for 3 days. 3 days, Michael, and I couldn't because you needed me to wait. I know, Hayes said quietly. I know what it cost you. I've been putting it together all night. You threw away your own shot at him over and over to keep us alive. And now he's walking through my pass, she said, and Walker's safe, and there's finally nothing standing between me and the shot except one order from a chief who's 45 minutes too far away to make me obey it. A breath. So here's the truth, Michael, and I need you to hear it because I'm not going to get another chance to say it. I'm not disobeying you. I'm not being a hero. I'm just doing the last piece of the same job I've been doing for 3 days. I get everybody home. That's the job. And I can't get you home for good. I can't get that whole base home while the man who spent 3 days trying to kill us is walking free with a launcher toward a hospital full of wounded kids. That's not home. Home is when he's stopped. So I'm going to stop him. And then if there is anything left of me, I'm going to hold on and wait for you exactly like you told me to. That's the best I can give you. That's the honest best I've got. Hayes closed his eyes. He gripped the radio and he closed his eyes and he understood that there was nothing on earth he could say to move her because she wasn't being reckless and she wasn't being suicidal. She was being exactly who she told him she was. 6 months ago in Virginia, the person who'd decided a long time ago what she'd do when everything fell apart, so she'd never have to decide it in the moment. I find a way to get everybody home. She'd been living that sentence for 3 days, and now she was going to finish it, and no order from him was going to stop her, because the order and the sentence were pointed at the same thing, keeping people alive, and she'd found the place where they finally came apart. 6 minutes, Carter said. Head of the column slowing at the mouth of the pass. He's being careful. Good. Careful is slow. Slow is more time for you. The duty officer was off the phone. QRF is spinning up. Wheels in 15, not 20, they're moving fast. I've got 2 birds and a full assault element. I've got a gunship rerouting off another, tasking it can be over that pass in 30 minutes if it burns fuel. Chief, we are coming. But she's right about the timeline. Nobody's stopping that column in the next 6 minutes but her. Hayes keyed the radio. His voice, when it came, had stopped fighting. Okay, he said. Okay, Emily, I can't stop you. I've known you 6 months, and I already know I can't stop you. So I'm going to do the only thing I can do, which is help you do it right and help you stay alive doing it. You listen to me now. You do not try to take the whole column. You cannot win a fight against 20 men, and you are not going to try. Here's what you do. You go for the launcher first. That's the thing that threatens the base and threatens the birds coming in. Kill the launcher, and you've saved the base no matter what else happens. Then you go for Khalid because a column without its head loses its nerve, especially at night, especially in a bottleneck. 2 shots, the launcher and the head. And the second you've taken them, you break contact and you go to ground and you hide and you let my birds finish the rest. You do not stand and fight 20 men. You take 2 shots and you disappear. Can you do that? Can you promise me that? A pause, the launcher and the head, Carter repeated. Then I disappear. Promise me, Emily. I promise, she said, and for once he believed it completely because it was a promise that let her live, and she kept her promises. Launcher then, Khalid then. I go dark and wait for you, I promise. 5 minutes to the pass, she added, and her voice shifted back into the flat, cold register. He remembered from the range the sniper's voice, the working voice. Michael, I have to stop talking now. I need both hands and I need my breathing quiet and I need everything I've got left. So I'm going to set the radio down beside me and leave it open. And you're going to hear all of it and you're not going to be able to do a single thing about any of it. And I'm sorry for that, I am. But I need you to hear it so you know. Whatever happens up here, I need somebody to know exactly what happened. And I want it to be you. Emily. Stay on the line, Chief. Just stay with me. That's all I needed from you now. Just don't go anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, Hayes said. I'm right here. I'll be right here the whole time. Every second. You're not alone up there. You hear me? I'm right here with you. I know, she said softly. That's why I called you. And then the quality of the sound changed as she set the radio down on the rock beside her, and the tent full of men gathered close around the speaker, Hayes and Jake and Bennett and the duty officer, and a growing knot of soldiers who drifted in as word spread, all of them standing in the dead of night around a small radio, listening to a mountain 40 miles away. For a long moment, there was only wind, the thin, high whistle of wind over rock and under it, the slow, controlled sound of a woman breathing, steadying herself in the small metallic sounds of a rifle being settled and a cheek being laid against a stock. Then her breathing slowed and went quiet, and the wind was the only sound, and Hayes stood with his fists clenched at his sides and his eyes fixed on the radio and did the hardest thing he had ever done in his life, which was nothing, which was to stand still and listen and trust her and not be able to help. The first shot came without warning. A single flat crack, distant, tinny through the small speaker, and then a beat later, a sound that made every man in the tent flinch. A secondary blast, bigger, a deep rolling boom that the radio strained to carry, and Hayes knew what it was before Carter's voice confirmed it, because she'd hit the launcher, and its warheads had gone up. "Launcher's down!" Her voice came tight, already moving. "Launcher's down. That's the base safe, Michael. The base is safe." Now Khalid, Hayes breathed at the radio she couldn't quite hear. Now the head. "Take him and go dark. Take him and disappear." Through the speaker, they could hear it all. Now the valley coming alive with the sound of 20 men who had just watched their launcher explode and realized that they were being fired on from the high ground, shouting the crackle of return fire, beginning rounds, starting to search the western slope for the shooter they couldn't see. And under all of it, close to the radio, Carter's breathing, still slow, still controlled, still working, refusing to be rushed by the chaos she'd unleashed. "Come on," Jake whispered. "Take the shot. Take him and get out of there. Come on, Carter." The second shot cracked across the speaker. And then silence. A held breath of silence in the tent and on the mountain both. And then Carter's voice, quiet, spent, and certain. "Khalid's down." A long, shaking breath. "He's down, Michael. Center of the column. He's down and he's not getting up. It's done. The head's off the snake. It's done." The tent erupted. Men grabbed each other. Someone shouted, "The duty." Officer slammed his hand down on the table and said yes. And Hayes felt something in his chest that he had not felt in 3 days come loose and rise. Because she'd done it. She'd done the impossible thing one more time. She'd taken the launcher and the target both and saved the base and finished the man they'd crossed the world, for all of it from a broken ridge on one leg with 30 rounds in spite. "Now get out of there," Hayes said into the radio, loud, urgent, joyful, and terrified at once. "You did it, Emily, you did it now. Keep your promise, break contact, go dark, disappear, my birds are coming. They're coming right now. Just get to cover and hold on and wait for me. Emily, break contact. Tell me you're moving. Tell me you're going to cover." For a moment, there was only the sound of the firefight through the speaker. The enemy pouring rounds up the western slope, leaderless, now panicking, but still shooting 20 guns, hunting one wounded woman on a hillside. "Emily, answer me. Are you moving?" Her voice came back, and it was different, and the difference put a cold hand around Hayes' heart. "I can't," she said simply. "Michael, I can't move. The leg's done. When I set up for that shot, I had to lock myself into position, and now I can't get out of it. I can't crawl. I don't have it left." A breath. "But it's okay. It's okay, Michael. The launcher's gone, and Khalid's gone, and the base is safe, and Walker's home. That's the whole job. That's everything I came to do. It's done. It's all done. I finished it." "No." Hayes was moving now toward the door, toward anything toward the flight line, his body refusing to stand still one more second. "No, it is not done. You do not get to do this. You promised me. You promised you'd break contact and wait for me." "I'm trying," she said. And he could hear that she meant it, could hear her fighting for it. "I'm trying, Chief. I want to keep that one. I want to keep it more than any promise I've ever made. But they're coming up the slope now, and I can't move. And I've got maybe 15 rounds left, and I'm going to use them to hold this position as long as I can, because if they take this high ground before your birds get here, they'll have the angle to shoot your birds down as they come in. So I'm going to hold it. I'm going to hold this piece of mountain until your people are on the ground. And that's the last thing, Michael. That's the very last thing, and then I'm done." "How far?" Hayes was shouting now, out the tent door into the night toward the flight line where 2 helicopters were already turning up, rotors starting to spin. "How far out are my birds? Somebody tell me, right now, how far?" 22 minutes, someone shouted back. 22 minutes. Emily, 22 minutes. You hold on for 22 minutes, you hear me. You can do 22 minutes. You held for 3 days. What's 22 minutes? I'll try, she said, and Hayes heard her rifle fire and fire again, holding the slope, holding the high ground, buying the lives of men she'd never met on birds that hadn't arrived yet. I'll do my best, Chief. I always do my best. That's not a yes, Emily. I need a yes. It's the best I've got. She said the same thing she'd said in the valley, the same thing she always said, and her rifle fired again and again, each shot spaced and deliberate even now, even at the end, still working, still refusing to waste a single round. Michael, while I've still got the breath for it, I need to say some things and I need you to just listen because I might not get another chance and I don't want to leave them unsaid. Don't, Hayes said, and his voice cracked wide open. Don't you say goodbye to me, Emily Carter. Don't you dare. You say goodbye when I'm standing on that mountain looking at you and not 1 second before. You save it. You hold on to it. I'm coming to get it in person. Her rifle fired. A pause. Fired again. Then come get it, Chief, she said, and there was that smile in her voice again, that impossible, tired, unbreakable smile. Come on up this mountain and make me say it to your face. I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere. A breath. I've got 12 rounds and a good position and the whole United States Navy on its way. I can hold. Just hurry, Michael. Her voice dropped and the last of it came through soft and human, and afraid the only time in 3 days she let him hear that she was afraid. Please hurry. I don't want to do the last part alone. You're not going to be alone, Hayes said, running now, running for the bird the radio pressed to his ear, Jakin and Bennett pounding across the tarmac beside him. You hold that mountain and you keep that radio open and you keep talking to me and you will not be alone for 1 single second because I am on my way and I am not stopping and I am going to be standing in front of you before that sun comes up. 12 rounds, Emily. Make them last. I'm coming. He threw himself into the helicopter and Jake and Bennett after him, and the ramp came up and the bird leapt off the pad into the dark, screaming, south toward the pass, toward the mountain, toward the woman holding it alone, with 12 rounds and a promise, and Hayes pressed the radio to his ear over the roar of the rotors and heard her rifle fire steady and spaced and calm once, and then again counting down, holding the line, and he put his mouth to the radio and said her name, and across the dark she answered, still there, still fighting, still waiting, and the helicopter flew into the night and as fast as it could carry 4 men toward the only thing that mattered anymore. The rifle fired once more through the radio, and then Hayes heard her count out loud for the first time, quiet to herself. Not for him, a number she probably didn't even know she was saying into the open channel. 11. 11 rounds. 11 rounds. The same number he'd carried into the worst of it down in the valley 3 days and a lifetime ago. Hayes gripped the radio and pressed his mouth to it over the scream of the rotors. Emily, talk to me. Where are they? How close? Halfway up the slope. Her voice was slower now, the words spaced out like her shots. They figured out I can't move. That's the problem. When a shooter can maneuver, you have to respect the whole hillside. When she can't, all you have to do is be patient. And whoever's leading them, now that Khalid's down, he's being patient. He stopped throwing men at me. Now he's working them up, careful rock to rock, spreading them wide so I can't cover all of them at once with one rifle. A breath. Smart. I hate that he's smart. How long can you hold? A pause. He'd learned to dread her pauses. Long enough, she said. I have to hold long enough, so I will. That's the whole of it, Chief. That's the entire tactical picture. I hold long enough or I don't, and I've decided I'm going to, so the rest is just details. That's not an answer, Emily. It's the only one that matters. Beside Hayes in the shaking cabin, Jake had his own radio out, hunched over it, working the frequencies with those hands that could fix anything, and Bennett was on his knees on the deck, with the medical kit he'd stripped off the surgical base spread open in front of him. Laying out blood, laying out pressure, dressings, laying out everything, his jaw set like a man building a wall against something he could already see coming. Nobody spoke. Nobody had to. Every man on that bird understood exactly what they were flying into and exactly how thin the margin was, and every man had decided somewhere between the tarmac and the dark that he would spend whatever it took to close it. 19 minutes, the pilot called back over the net. 19 minutes to the pass and I'm redlining her. Chief, I want you to know that. This is as fast as this aircraft flies. I push her past this and I'm risking the engine, and then we get there in pieces or we don't get there at all. 19 minutes. Emily. Hayes made his voice into the thing she needed. Steady flat the anchor a drowning person grabs for. 19 minutes. You hear that number? 19 minutes and my boots are on that mountain. You give me 19 minutes. I'll try. Her rifle fired. 10, she said quietly. The number went through Hayes like a blade slipped between two ribs. 10 rounds, 19 minutes. A slope full of careful men working up through the dark toward a woman who couldn't run. He did the math the way he did all math, now cold and fast, and against his will, and the math said things a chief could not afford to believe, so he shut it off. He'd gotten good at shutting it off these last 3 days. It was the only way to keep functioning inside a set of numbers that all added up to the same terrible total. Talk to me, he said. Keep talking to me. Don't you go quiet on me. What do you see? Give me the picture. I see them, she said. That's the one thing I've still got, Chief. I can still see there's a big one coming up the left. Using the flat rock thinks I haven't spotted him because I've been favoring the right side. Her rifle fired. A pause. 9, he's not coming up anymore. Jake made a sound, half a laugh and half something that tore and dragged the back of his hand across his eyes. God, she's still perfect. 9 rounds left bleeding out on a mountain and she's still not wasting a single one. Chief, nobody shoots like that. Nobody in the world shoots like that with a clock like that. She does, Hayes said. She always has. Michael. Her voice shifted and the shift put a cold hand flat against his chest because it was the voice of someone setting something down carefully so it wouldn't break on the way to the floor. There's something I need to say to you, and I want to say it while my head's still clear because I can feel it starting to go a little soft around the edges. The blood, the cold, and I want to get this out while the words are still mine and not the wounds. You can tell me on the ground in 20 minutes, face to face. Let me tell you now, Emily, please, Chief. And there was something in it he'd never heard from her, not in 6 months, not through any of it. Let me have this one thing. I've asked you for almost nothing. Let me have this. Hayes closed his eyes. Around him, the cabin roared, and the dark swept past the open door, and somewhere ahead, a mountain was waiting. Okay, he said. Okay, tell me. I'm listening. I'm right here, and I'm listening to every word. 6 months ago, you asked me a question, she said. In Virginia, after that field exercise that came apart on us, you pulled me aside and you asked me what I'd do if everything fell apart at once. No comms, no support, out of ammunition, cut off from the team. And I gave you an answer you didn't like. I said I'd find a way to get everybody home. And you looked at me like I'd handed you a fortune cookie, and you said, that's not a plan, Lieutenant. That's a bumper sticker. A breath and something that was almost a laugh riding under it. You remember that? I remember every word of it, Hayes said. I've been remembering it for 3 days straight. It's been running in my head on a loop since the mountain came down on you. Well, I need you to know it wasn't a line. It wasn't me being cute or dodging your question. When I was a girl, my father was a firefighter, Chicago, 22 years on the job. And when I was 11, he ran into a building that everybody else was running out of. A building the chief on scene had already called a loss, and he went in anyway, and he brought 4 people out of it. 4 strangers, a mother, and 3 kids. And then he went back in one more time because somebody said there might be one more and there wasn't. And the roof came down and he didn't come out. Her voice didn't waver. She'd made peace with this story a long time ago. He could hear it. And everybody at the funeral kept telling me how sorry they were, like something had been stolen from me. And I stood there 11 years old and I couldn't feel what they wanted me to feel. Because all I could think was 4 people slept in their own beds that night because of my dad. 4 people got to grow old. And I decided right there standing at that graveside that whatever I did with my one life, that was going to be the whole entire point of it. Getting people home. Everybody except maybe me. That was the deal I made. That was the deal I made at 11 years old, and I have never once wanted out of it. Her rifle fired. 8, she said. Hayes could not speak. In the cabin, Bennett had gone still over his kit, and Jake was staring at the radio with tears standing in his eyes, and even the roar of the aircraft seemed to have pulled back to let the small voice come through. So when the slope came down on me 3 days ago, Carter went on quieter now, and I came to under a foot of rock with my leg opened up and my primary radio crushed and my backup crushed, and I could hear you all getting cut to pieces in the valley below me, and there was not one single thing I could do about it. I didn't think, how do I survive this? That thought never came. I thought, how do I get them home? That was it. That was the only thought I had room for. For 3 days, that was the only thought in my head, waking and sleeping, and I did it, Michael. Piece by piece, I did it. I got Walker to a surgeon. I got Jake and Marcus out of that valley. I got you out. I got the base kept safe and Khaled put down, and now there's just this one last slope, these birds of yours coming in, and once I've held this piece of ground long enough for your people to land without getting shot out of the sky, then every last person is home. Every one. And my father's daughter will have done her whole job, start to finish all the way to the end, without leaving anybody behind. A breath. So whatever happens up here in the next 20 minutes, I need you to understand something, and I need you to really hear it. I am not losing tonight. You understand me, whatever it looks like. If I don't walk off this mountain, you are not to stand at some graveside letting people tell you something was taken from you. Because a person who gets everybody home doesn't lose. That's not a loss. That's the win. That's the only win there is, and that's the one thing, the only thing I need you to carry out of here for me. Can you carry that, Chief? Can you promise me you'll carry that one? Hayes had to grip the frame of the seat until his knuckles went white to keep his voice from coming apart entirely. You're going to carry it yourself, he said, because you're walking off that mountain, Emily, on your own 2 feet or on my back, I don't care which, but you're walking off it. And in 6 months, you're going to tell me this whole story again in some bar with bad beer, and I'm going to be so sick of hearing it, I'll pay for your drinks just to make you stop. You do not get to hand me your last words. I won't take them. I told you in the valley, and I'll tell you again now. I do not take last words from my people. You keep them. You hold on to every one of them. I'm coming up that mountain to make you say all of it to my face and not one word of it before. I know you don't take last words, she said, and there was warmth in it, tired and real. That's why I called you. Out of everybody in the world I could have raised on that relay, I called you because I knew you'd argue with me the whole way down. I needed somebody who'd argue. It's easier to hold on when there's somebody on the other end refusing to let you go. Her rifle fired. 15 minutes, the pilot called. 15 minutes, Emily. Did you hear that? 15. You held for 3 days. What's 15 more minutes to a woman who held for 3 days? An eternity, she said, and no time at all. Funny how it's both. A pause. Her breathing had changed, and Hayes hated the change, the shallowness creeping into it, the little catch at the top of each breath. Michael, they're getting close now, close enough that I can hear them talking to each other. They've stopped bothering to whisper. That's how I know they think I'm almost done. When they were afraid of me, they were silent. Now they're talking. That's not a good sign. I want you to know that, so it's not a shock when the rhythm of my shooting changes. Emily, don't just let me tell you what's happening, so you're ready for it. That's all. Knowledge is the only gift I've got left to give you from up here. And then it happened, the thing Hayes had been dreading since the first pause, the twist he hadn't seen coming, even though a part of him had been braced for something, because Omar Khalid had already fooled them once by surviving a mountain, and men like that always had one more card. Wait, Carter said. Her voice sharpened, went taut, went to the flat, cold working register that meant she'd seen something. Wait, Michael, there's a second element, coming up the reverse slope behind me, behind my position. A beat. How did I not see them? How did they get up the back of the runway? A sharp breath. They flanked me. While I've been holding the front, a second team came up the blind side, and they're above me now, Michael. They're above me and behind me, and I've got 7 rounds facing the wrong direction. The cabin went to ice. How many? Hayes said. Emily, how many behind you? 4, maybe 5. They're moving into position on the high rock. In about 60 seconds, they'll have a clean angle down onto me, and I've got nothing between them and me but air. Her voice didn't rise. It never rose. But it got very fast and very precise the way it did when the margins closed to nothing. I can't cover both directions. I turn to face them, the front element rushes me. I stay facing front, the back element takes me at their leisure. There's no shot that solves this, Chief. For the first time in 3 days, there's no shot. They finally caught me in a place where being the best marksman on the mountain doesn't matter, because I can't be in two directions at once, and I can't move. Hayes was on his feet in the cabin, one hand locked on the overhead line, his whole body straining forward as if he could push the aircraft faster by will alone. Pilot, I need everything you've got. She's flanked. She's got a second element above her. I don't have more, Chief, the pilot shouted back, anguished. I am past red line right now. I am past it. If I had one more knot in this bird, I would give it to you. But there is nothing left in her. We are 12 minutes out, and that is a physical fact I cannot change no matter how bad either of us wants it changed. 12 minutes, 60 seconds. The numbers would not reconcile. They would never reconcile. Hayes stared at the dark rushing past the door and felt the bottom of the world open up under him, because he was going to arrive 12 minutes after the 60 seconds ran out, and there was nothing that any man on this aircraft could do about it. Emily, he said, and his voice was breaking. Emily, listen to me. Get down. Get as flat as you can get behind the biggest rock you can reach. Make yourself small. Make yourself impossible. There's nowhere to go, Chief. And she said it gently, the way she'd said everything gently at the end. I locked myself into this position for the shot on Khalid, and I told you I can't get out of it. I can't crawl. The leg's done. I'm exactly where I am, and that's where I'll stay. A breath. But listen to me. I've got one thing left. One card, the gunship. The gunship's not on station for another. Not yours. Not the one coming. Listen. Her voice had gone electric alive, the sound of a mind moving faster than the situation. The rerouted gunship. The one command pulled off another tasking. You told me it was burning fuel to get here. How far out is it? Right now, how far? Hayes spun toward the duty officer's voice patched through the net. Where's my gunship? Where is it? Give me a number. A crackle. Then a new voice on the net, a pilot's drawl, calmed the way only a gunship pilot at altitude can be calm. Ground element. This is Reaper 6. I'm inbound. Your location, I've got you on my scope. I'm about 4 minutes out and closing. I've been monitoring your frequency. I heard the lady. Somebody put me on the lady right now. Emily, Hayes shouted. The gunship. It's 4 minutes out. It can hear you. Talk to it. Talk to the gunship. And what happened next, Hayes would carry to the end of his life as the single most extraordinary thing he ever heard a human being do. Because a wounded woman flanked out of options 60 seconds from being killed from above, with 7 rounds in one working leg, did not panic and did not pray and did not say goodbye. She went to work. Reaper 6, this is Ghost 1, how do you read? Her voice snapped into a clean, crisp cadence, all the pain pressed flat under it. I am a single, friendly, wounded, static position, western high ground, above the pass, and I am about to get overrun. I have a hostile element of 4 to 5 moving onto the high rock directly behind and above my position, call it 30 meters at my 6 o'clock upslope. I need you to put your guns on that high rock. Danger close. I say again, danger close. Put your fire on the rock 30 meters at my 6. I will mark my own position. Do you copy? Ghost 1 and Reaper 6. I copy danger close, but I need eyes. I need you marked. I am not putting rounds 30 meters off a friendly without a mark. How are you going to mark over? I'm going to mark with an IR strobe on my own body, Carter said. So you know exactly where the line is, and you keep every round uphill of the strobe. Do you understand me? Everything uphill of the strobe is theirs, and everything at the strobe and below is mine, and you do not cross that line. I am trusting you with the 30 meters, Reaper. I've got no cover and no time to argue about it. Can you thread that needle or not? A pause on the net. 2 seconds. 3. Ghost 1, Reaper 6 said, and his drawl had gone quiet and certain. I've been flying this platform for 11 years. You put your strobe on, and you press yourself into the dirt below it, and I will lay a wall of fire on that rock so tight you'll feel the heat and not the rounds. I can thread it. Mark now. Marking now, Carter said. Strobe is on. Strobe is on. Everything uphill is yours, Reaper. Send it. Send it now. They're moving. Send it. And through the radio, through her open channel, the whole cabin heard it. The gunship arriving, the deep tearing roar of its guns opening up on the high rock 30 meters above, a woman pressed flat into the mountain with a strobe blinking on her back, A wall of fire laid down with 11 years of skill and not one round crossing the line she'd drawn on her own body. And Hayes heard men screaming on the reverse slope, the flanking element torn apart before it could fire a shot. And then he heard Carter's voice ragged alive, disbelieving, laughing, and sobbing at once. They're down. Reaper, they're down. The back element's down. You did it? You threaded it? Oh my God, you threaded it? Told you I could thread it, Ghost 1, Reaper 6 said, dry as dust. Now what about your front element? Front element's breaking, Carter gasped. They saw what you did to their flankers. They're pulling back down the slope. They've lost their nerve. They're running, Reaper. The whole slope's running. Then hold what you've got, ma'am, the gunship pilot said. I'm going to walk my guns down that slope and encourage the rest of them. You keep that strobe on so I know where you are. Cavalry's here. You just hold what you've got. And Hayes stood in the cabin of a helicopter 12 minutes out and listened to a gunship save the woman he loved from 400 feet up, guided onto the target by that same woman lying wounded and marking her own position in the dark. And he put his face in his free hand and let 3 days of held back everything pour out of him. And no man in that cabin looked away, and no man said a word because there was nothing to say. She'd found the shot. In a place where he'd told her there was no shot, she'd found one. She'd used the whole sky as her rifle. Emily, he said when he could speak. Emily, talk to me. Are you hit? Did you take anything from that? I'm okay. Her voice was thin now, thinner than before the adrenaline draining and leaving the wound underneath. I'm okay, Michael. Some rock, some grit. My ears are ringing like church bells. But the strobe held, and Reaper held the line, and I'm okay. The slope's clearing. The gunship's got it. It's over, Michael. I think it's actually over. A breath that shook. I don't have to hold anymore. Do I? Somebody else has it now. Somebody else has it, Hayes said. The gunship has it. You can stop, Emily. You did it. You held the mountain long enough, and now you can stop holding it. You hear me? Set the rifle down. Let go of it. Help is here, and I am 9 minutes out, and all you have to do now is breathe and stay with me. That's the whole job now. Just breathe and stay. Just breathe and stay, she repeated, and he heard the rifle move. Heard her set it down at last after 3 days of never letting it out of her hands, and the sound of it was the sound of the war finally ending for her. Okay, Chief, I can do that. Breathe and stay. That's an easier job than the last one. The next 9 minutes were the longest of Michael Hayes' life, and also in a strange way the first easy ones in 3 days, because for the first time the clock was on his side. The slope was clearing. The gunship prowled overhead, walking its guns along the ridgeline, scattering the last of Khalid's broken force into the mountains, where the coming daylight and the reaction force would deal with them. And Hayes talked to her the entire way, and she talked back slower and slower, her voice thinning, as the blood loss finally caught up, now that there was no fight left to hold it off. But she kept answering, kept holding the thread taut across the closing dark, and he would not let a gap of more than a few seconds open, filling every silence with her name, with the count of minutes, with anything to keep her tethered to the sound of his voice. 4 minutes, Emily. I can see the past now. I can see the gunship's tracers. 4 minutes. I see your lights, she said faintly. I see your bird coming in. Michael, your lights are the prettiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean that. I've seen a lot of things. Your landing lights coming over that ridge are the prettiest. You hold on. Keep looking at them. I'm almost there. Marcus, Carter said, her voice going fainter. Marcus, you on this net. I'm here, Bennett said, leaning into the radio, his voice thick. I'm right here, Emily. I'm coming with the kit. Everything you need, I've got it on my back right now. You just keep that blood inside you a few more minutes, you hear me? Don't you dare waste a drop. I worked too hard on Walker to lose you on the same night. How's my tourniquet look? She murmured. Be honest. You're the only one who's ever honest with me about the medical stuff. From what you've told me, it's a textbook tourniquet, and it's the only reason we're still having this conversation, Bennett said. You tied off a bleed that should have killed you in 20 minutes, and you made it last 3 days. I'm going to use that tourniquet in a class someday, Emily. I'm going to stand up in front of a room full of corpsmen and tell them about the sniper who kept herself alive for 72 hours on a mountain with one tourniquet and a bad attitude. Now stay with me. A bad attitude, she said, and Hayes heard her laugh, weak, real. That's fair. That's fair, Marcus. 2 minutes, the pilot called, and the note in his voice had changed completely, joy breaking through the strain. 2 minutes, Chief. I've got the western high ground in sight. I've got a strobe. Chief, I can see her strobe. That's her, Hayes said. That's her strobe. Emily, I can see you. I can see your strobe from the air. We've got you. We've got your position. We're coming in 2 minutes. 2 minutes, she breathed. Michael, I'm going to be honest with you now because you can see my strobe and there's no point being tough about it anymore. I'm real tired. I'm real tired. 3 days is a long time to hold your breath. Is it okay if I close my eyes? Just for the 2 minutes. I'll open them when you get here. I promise I'll open them when you get here. And every cell in Hayes's body turned to ice because he knew Bennett knew every man who'd ever done this work, knew what it meant when the wounded asked if they could close their eyes. No, Hayes said, and it came out harder than he'd said anything in 3 days. No, you keep your eyes open, Emily, harder. That's a direct order, and it's the last one I'm going to give you tonight, and you are going to obey it. You keep those eyes open, and you keep them on my landing lights, and you keep talking to me. You don't get to close your eyes. Not 2 minutes, 2 minutes from now. Not 2 minutes. You held for 3 days. You do not get to quit in the last 2 minutes. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? I hear you, Chief. Her voice was so faint now. I hear you. Okay, eyes open. Eyes on your lights. I won't close them. I'm sorry. I won't. I'll wait for you. I said I'd wait for you, and I keep my promises. Keep talking. Emily, keep talking to me. Tell me something. Tell me anything. Tell me what you're going to do when you get home. When I get home, she murmured, and he could hear her fighting for each word now, dragging them up from somewhere deep. When I get home, I'm going to find Walker. First thing, before the doctors, even before anything. I'm going to walk into that kid's hospital room and I'm going to look at him and I'm going to say, told you I'd get you home. I've been saving that. I've been saving those words for 3 days. That's what I've been holding on for Michael. Not to be a hero, not for a medal. I just want to say 4 words to a scared kid I made a promise to. Told you I'd get you home. That's all. That's the whole thing. Then you stay awake and you say them to him. Hayes said, the aircraft flaring now, dropping the mountain, rushing up. Because I am not going to be the one to tell that boy you didn't make it back to say it. You hear me? You are going to say those 4 words to Daniel Walker yourself. So you hold on. 30 seconds. We're setting down. 30 seconds. Emily, hold on, hold on, hold on. The helicopter slammed onto the western high ground before it had fully settled, and Hayes was already out the door, out into the real dark, the real cold air running across broken rock toward the blinking strobe, with Bennett right behind him, hauling the kit and Jake behind Bennett, and Hayes was shouting her name into the actual night, and no radio between them, no static, just his voice and the mountain and the fading stars. Emily. And a voice answered, weak, close, real. No radio between them anymore, just air and 30 feet of rock. Over here, Chief. A pause, and even now, even at the very bottom of everything, that dry, unbreakable thread. Told you I'd wait. Took you long enough, though. I was starting to think you got lost. He found her in the rocks, where she'd locked herself in for that last shot, exactly where she'd said she'd be. Her rifle beside her, where she'd finally set it down. The IR strobe still blinking faithfully on her chest, her leg dark and ruined beneath a tourniquet she'd tied off God knew how many hours before. Her face was gray and her eyes were half closed, and she was the worst he had ever seen a living human being look and still be living. But she was living. Her eyes were open, and when they found his face in the dark, she smiled. Hey, Chief, she said, and Hayes went down on his knees in the rocks beside her and got his arms around her, careful, so careful. And Bennett was already there, already tearing the kit open, already running a line and hanging blood and calling out numbers, his hands moving with the same desperate, certain fury that had kept Walker breathing for 3 impossible days. And Jake was on the radio calling the medevac forward, and Hayes held her and pressed his forehead to the top of her head, and for a long moment could not make his voice work at all. Marcus, Carter said faintly, give it to me straight. You're the only one who ever does. You want it straight. Bennett didn't look up, his hands never stopping. Straight as you're a stubborn pain in my neck who refuses to die on schedule, and it's the most annoying thing about you. The leg is bad. You've lost more blood than any person has a right to lose and still be sassing me. But the tourniquet held, and I've got 2 units going into you right now, and your heart is still beating strong enough to argue with me, which means you're going to make me work for this one, but I am going to win it. You hear me, Emily? I am going to win this one. You did not drag yourself up this entire mountain and thread a gunship through a 30-meter needle just to quit on my kit. That would embarrass us both. Wouldn't dream of embarrassing you, Marcus, she whispered. Emily. Hayes pulled back just enough to see her face to make her see his. You made me a promise. In the valley and again just now on the radio. You said you'd wait for me and you'd keep your eyes open. You did both. So now I'm giving you the last order. The last one. Come home. All the way home. Not part way, not almost. All the way. Don't you dare stop now, not when I'm right here holding you, not after everything you did to get us all out. You come the rest of the way home. I'm not stopping, Chief. Her hand found his and gripped it weak, but there warm, real alive. I told you, I don't break promises to my team. Not to Walker. Not to you. Not ever. A breath and the ghost of that fierce, tired smile. Besides, you came all the way up this mountain to make me say it to your face. It'd be awful rude of me to die before you got what you came for. Say what? Hayes said, and his voice broke clean in half. Her eyes held his and would not let go, and the smile came again, faint and unbreakable and entirely her own. Goodbye's off the table, she said. I'm not saying it, not tonight, not for a long, long time. You're going to be stuck with me, Chief. That's the thing I wanted to say to your face. Not goodbye, never goodbye, I'm coming home. And she did. The medevac came screaming in, and they got her aboard, and Bennett fought for her, the whole flight, the way he'd fought for Walker on his knees in the red light, with his hands full of blood, and his jaw set, and she made it. She made it through that night, and through the surgeries that followed, 3 of them, long and brutal, and through the grim early days when the doctors spoke in careful voices about whether the leg could be saved at all. And it was saved barely because she was young and strong, and because she fought for it the same way she fought for everything, and she made it through the longer, harder months after that, the months of learning to stand again, then to walk without the cane, a body relearning from the ground up how to carry the person inside it. She made it home. And in a military hospital in Germany, 3 weeks after that mountain, a young man named Daniel Walker, moving slow and careful with his own healing wound, walked into her room without a word and stood at the foot of her bed and could not speak. He'd heard the whole story by then. Bennett had told him, and Jake had told him, and Hayes had told him the parts they each knew, and the boy had wept through all of it and had asked every day when he could see her until finally he was strong enough to walk the 2 corridors that separated them. She looked up from her bed and saw him standing there, the scared kid she'd promised on his first week, and something crossed her face that Hayes, watching from the doorway, would never forget as long as he lived. Hey, kid, she said, told you I'd get you home. And Daniel Walker came apart completely the way you come apart when someone hands you back a life you'd already given up for lost, and he crossed the room and took her hand in both of his and could not get a single word out, and she held on to him while he cried, the 2 of them home, both of them all the way home. The 4 words she'd saved and carried up a mountain and through a firefight and held on to with the last of her strength across a radio in the dark. Told you I'd get you home. She'd spent everything she had to earn the right to say them, and she'd said them, and in the saying the thing she decided to be at 11 years old at her father's graveside was complete. The official report of that operation ran to a few dry paragraphs. It noted the elimination of a high-value target named Omar Khalid. It noted the successful extraction of a compromised special operations element. It noted commendable performance by supporting air assets. It used careful, bloodless words that said almost nothing at all the way those reports always do, because there is no official language, no line in any form ever printed for what a person becomes when she decides that getting everybody home is not a thing she does, but the thing she is. But the men who were there had the language. They carried it the rest of their lives, and they were not shy about spending it. Years later, long after the uniforms were folded and put away, when someone would ask Michael Hayes about the hardest night of his career, the 3 days his team was written off and left for dead in a valley on the far side of the world, he never talked about the enemy or the ammunition running out or the cold or the long dark hours spent waiting to die. He talked about a question he'd asked a brand new lieutenant in a cold team room in Virginia, and the answer she'd given him that he hadn't been ready to believe. He'd say it slow, and he'd say it exactly the way she'd said it word for word because he'd earned the right to, and because he'd never found a truer set of words to put in its place. We weren't saved by an army, he'd say. We weren't saved by air support or a rescue force or a lucky break. We were saved by one person who decided when she was 11 years old that she was going to spend her life getting people home. And then through 3 days in a shattered mountain and a bullet in her leg and every single reason in the world to lie down and quit, she refused to be anything other than exactly what she'd promised she would be. And that is the whole truth of it. When the comms went dead and the last round was counted and every map and every report in the world said there was no one left alive on that ridge, one wounded woman rose up out of the rocks in the last of the light, kept her word, and carried an entire team home on her back. She never once called herself a hero. She only ever called it the job. But the men who walked out of that valley because of her knew exactly what she was, and they knew it for the rest of their days, and not one of them ever spoke her name without going quiet first. Emily Carter got everybody home, every last one of them, and that is not a story about a soldier who was lost. That is a story about the one who refused against all of it to lose a single soul. She made a promise. She kept it, and she came home.